One of our big problems with any of the atypical antipsychotics, also with lithium or valproate, is metabolic symptoms. And we find that 68% of bipolar patients are overweight, 32% are not only overweight but obese, and that's relative to, the United States as a whole is a country where obesity is a big problem, but for bipolar patients even more so. They're 3 times more likely to have metabolic syndrome, and this is despite consuming fewer calories. So when questioned, I'm not sure how some of these studies were done, but they're consuming fewer calories, fewer carbohydrates, and more fiber than healthy control. So how is this possible? How could somebody who's actually eating a more healthy diet be more likely to have metabolic syndrome? Thoughts? Some people are shaking their heads like now. So, right. So both tiny changes in what your resting metabolic rate is can increase or decrease your calories. And also, there was a study, not in bipolar people in particular, but in the British Medical Journal, they published a study in healthy controls, but they looked at people who were, quote, naturally fat or, quote, naturally thin. And neither group identified as being exercisers. So they wired them up with special underwear that picked up every tiny movement. And what did they find? Yeah, I don't know how they got the volunteers for this, but so every tiny movement was found, and so people who were, quote, naturally thin, but didn't exercise, they said, no, I don't really exercise, they found that they burned up about 500 extra calories a day in fidgeting. They were constantly making little micro movements, and every time I say this in a talk, then the whole audience sort of shifts a little bit. But so doing sedentary activities like watching TV, the, quote, naturally thin people were crossing and uncrossing their legs, shifting, so forth. People who do that annoying thing with their pen, where they twirl it around like a helicopter, they're on the phone and they're pacing and so forth. So it turns out that doing these little micro movements that you're not even aware of and not doing consciously can burn up about 500 calories a day. So again, that wasn't a study in bipolar people, so I don't have that in these slides. But it's important that when your patients tell you, I'm really not eating that badly. I'm trying. I eat better than anyone in my family. They may not be lying. They may not be lying. I mean, they might be. But I've had patients where I'm watching them in the hospital, and so they're only getting what we can give to them on the tray, and they're not stealing from anybody else's tray, and yet they're gaining weight at a rate that that somebody else would not be. So some of this can be from medications, some of this can be from bad diet, but the basal metabolic rate, which the patient has no control over, and the little micro movements that they're doing, especially in the depressed phase of bipolar, they may be gaining weight even though they're not eating badly.